Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the LDM show. On today's show we're going to be discussing a really amazing topic, the topic of, is belief in a creator natural, or is this something which is taught by society?
As a social science student, I kind of take issue with the way that you're attempting to separate society from the natural world, considering that society is just as every bit reliant upon the natural world as any other creature. So, I think what you're looking for is the phrase, is belief in God innate or taught, not natural or taught. So, yes, just because we do it, it doesn't stop being natural. Greetings and welcome there, people of YouTube. This is Essence of 14. Of course, I'm doing a video response to London Dawa's Movement's video, God Exists, Full Stop, the Argument from Nature. So, let's not delay any further, and let's get straight into it.
So, how would you summarize this argument from nature, argument from fitrah?
Cool. So, Bismillah, what we're basically saying is that we don't need any arguments to prove the existence of God. Point number one. Because it's a properly basic belief.
Really? This fallacious reasoning again? That which can be asserted without evidence can be rejected without evidence. Hitchens razor. So, are we done here?
Right, now let's break down what we mean by properly basic belief.
But that would be making a case, and therefore would be an argument. I'm just looking for some consistency here. But hey ho, maybe now I'll actually get that argument that I was supposed to get from Musa Adnan, but he failed to do in his video. My response links down below. So yes, continue with your points.
When we say a properly basic belief, what we're saying, it's a belief that doesn't require any other beliefs. It's not based on any other beliefs, okay? And also it doesn't require any information transfer.
Okay, so you are defining a properly basic belief as one that does not require previous knowledge or informational input. Therefore, it does kind of agree with the whole idea of innate belief. So I would expect then to see this throughout everyone, throughout history, regardless of race, nationality, creed, etc. So I'd expect to see that.
Now we'll look into this just to explain a bit further as to what we mean. Now, in comparison, a properly basic belief that we believe in, that science uses, an assumption that science is based on, is that the real world exists.
The real world is real.
Yeah, and you can't prove it, right? But you have to accept it to do science.
Yeah.
Okay?
I agree with the fact that you have to make the assumption that the universe exists in order to study universal law, i.e. science. However, this then does not match up with your definition of properly basic, as there are people out there who believe that their conscience is the only thing that actually exists and they are going through an artificial scenario, i.e. it is therefore not innate or universal, i.e. therefore does not match up with the previous definition of properly basic that you gave. There's a reason we call it an assumption and not properly basic belief, because it's an assumption. You are attempting to play semantics here to mix the two, to blur the lines between them, to try and force your theology in. Doesn't really sit.
Another example is what Bertrand Russell shared. What he said was that you cannot disprove this concept that the world that we live in began 5 minutes ago and it has just this inbuilt memory of it showing or making it appear like that the history has aged to it. Our history has aged to it. You can't disprove this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you won't believe it because it doesn't make sense. You will believe that the history of the world is very, very long. It's old in age, right?
That's a properly
basic belief, right? And you're justified in believing that.
Right, well, there's one major problem here for you, and that is in Occam's razor. You see, Occam's razor dictates that the simplest solution is often the best, and it deals with assumptions in their, amount and also how severe they are. Take, for example, the assumption that the universe was created 5 minutes prior now. That is a large assumption. Therefore, as an extraordinary assumption, would require an extraordinary amount of evidence. Such evidence has not been supplied. Therefore, the idea that the universe existed prior 5 minutes should be taken as the philosophically sound one. When dealing with God, however, it is quite the opposite. You see, when dealing with the origins of the universe, I make the one assumption. The universe came into existence on its own devices. You, however, would make the assumption that God came into existence on his own devices God had the ability to create the universe, God wanted to create the universe, and God did create the universe. You would have to make those 4 assumptions to my singular one. So this is more a numerical aspect compared to dealing with the idea that the universe was created 5 minutes earlier, which is dealing with extraordinary claims. So yeah, you've actually got it backwards. The properly basic belief, if we went by this, would be the non-existence of God. And the reason for this is that Bertrand Russell created this argument to argue against religion and against God. This is the guy who created the celestial teapot. He is one of the greatest atheistic minds behind philosophy, and you're attempting to use his arguments against God to ridicule atheists? That makes no sense in the slightest. The fact is, the belief in your God is unfounded, just like the belief in the idea that the universe was created 5 minutes ago. You need to provide the extraordinary evidence of your extraordinary claims, or deal with the facts that you have none.
What I'm arguing is that the belief in God, believing in a creator, is also a properly basic belief, just like these properly basic beliefs, basically.
Okay.
Right?
Except in the idea of your own definition, how they fail to be properly basic beliefs, but are rather known as assumptions that humans make in order to work within a naturalistic worldview. That is why we call them assumptions.
So what do we mean by information transfer? What we're saying is that these beliefs, they're base core beliefs which don't require any external information to come in, right? So no one has to come to you. If you were on a desert island, no one has to come to you and tell you that God exists. Naturally, you will grow up believing in a God, that God exists. Does that make sense?
No, as every atheist out there is testament to. This is not the case. Then go back through history and look at religion prior the development of gods. The fact that there was a time prior the development of gods. It worked up gradually from the very basic worship of totems, of spirits, etc., and eventually, gradually over time, became more anthropomorphized in sense. So, all evidence to the contrary.
It makes sense. What if somebody says, I have a belief that there is a pink elephant,
Right.
and this is the properly basic belief.
Good point.
And
Very
they,
good
and they
point.
try and refute you.
Very
using
good point.
this.
Okay, let's go back to the scenario of being on a desert island, right? Say you were on a desert island, you grew up there without any external influence, anyone coming in and teaching you or telling you anything, right? Like I said, you will naturally, and this is supporting evidence, which we're going to go into at the end.
Is this evidence for the argument that you apparently won't make?
Naturally, you'll grow up believing in a creator,
Sure.
right? But you won't naturally grow up believing in a pink elephant that created everything, or a blue rhino, right?
So you're saying there has to be some information.
Someone has to come in from the outside world and say, hello, Sabur, there's a pink elephant or a blue rhino that's created everything. Someone has to tell you this for you to believe this. You won't naturally come up with this concept, right? So it doesn't require any information transfer. That's why it's a properly basic belief.
Except for the very fact that it does. However, usually when looking at societies, we do see something known as the myths of origin. Now you might leap out your seat saying, that's what we mean. But let me explain the origins of the myths of origins. The origins start with thought processes, i.e., as a child growing up, you see, a seed brings forward a plant, a woman brings forward a baby. You then have this psychological subconscious equivocation fallacy going on, thinking, well, if that's where this came from and that's where that came from, where did the universe come from? It's not properly basic, however. By your own definition, as noted, this requires input. The only way you could prove your hypothesis is if you managed to get a person who could not see, taste, hear, or anything, could not use any of their senses, and then could manage to understand what they are thinking. By doing that, you would therefore be breaking the conditions. Therefore, it is an impossible task, cannot be done, and therefore cannot be asserted.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you for clarifying that. And actually, when we speak about properly basic beliefs, something it reminds me of is in the Quran, Allah asks all of mankind, all human beings, even the people watching the show right now, and Allah asked, am I not your Lord? And we all said, Richard Dawkins, Hitler, you, me, everyone said, yes, we have testified.
Yes.
No, we did not. And this is known as a lie. Directly, not even hidden. Professional bullshitting.
And what's really, really amazing is that every single language in the world has a word for God.
Yes.
It might not necessarily have a word for demons or devils or vampires or something like this, something strange. But there is definitely the word God, Allah.
Even various tribes people who worship totems and spirits, but not a god or deity. What about, again, that period of time prior to the invention of gods where that was all people worshipped, and from these gods with anthropomorphic aspects were developed? I do not class spirits or totems as gods, because to me a god has to have a clear anthropomorphic consciousness. What these people worshipped didn't necessarily have that. On top of this, what about the people who have not had contact with the outside world, or at least not to the extent that we could know what they say or even their language? How can you speak for them? That's what I want to know, because currently you are just asserting stuff without evidence, and I don't really have to provide evidence to bash that back, because again, what can be asserted without evidence can be rejected without evidence.
Yes. It's very interesting because there's many communities, tribes around the world that we don't even hear about. But when people have gone into these tribes and they've seen that these people believe in a higher power, a supreme being, a creator.
And here we see Hussein moving the goalpost to try and save Ahmed from what he just stated. It is not a properly basic belief and comes from external input and a very childish equivocation fallacy.
Because it's natural, right? It's a natural belief. That is a core belief, like we were saying. And there's some supporting evidence as well.
Before you go into that, I want to quote a hadith which I actually have here.
Sure.
The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Every newborn child is born in a state of fitra. Then his parents make him a Jew, a Christian, or a Magian, just as an animal is born intact." Right?
You know what's amazing here? Is that this was mentioned when?
1400
Over
years ago.
1400 years ago.
That is natural.
Recently, individuals like Justin or Barrett from Oxford, right?
Okay.
And he studied children. Oxford University.
Okay.
Right? He studied children for over, I think, 10 years. He's published several books on this topic. What he said, Born Believers being one of them, what he's showing is that the belief in God is absolutely natural. Atheism is unnatural. To claim that God doesn't exist, this is unnatural. And he showed the example of children being left on a desert island, hypothetically speaking, and growing up themselves. They will naturally grow up believing in a creator. Now this is a scientific study, right?
Is he the one who's written Why Would Anyone Believe in God? I think that's another book.
Yeah, that's another book.
You are so unlucky that it is me doing a video response to you. The fact is, I've dealt with this before, and again, it was a religious individual, Christian, quote mining the hell out of Barrett to try and support his view. Here is a quote from Barrett from an article he wrote in response to atheist criticism. I've explained about how the child's mind commits equivocation when trying to figure out the world, and this leads to them making up stuff to fill the void. But even the quote displayed on your video disagrees with you. For one, it states that they acquire the mind, i.e., through external information. Then there's the fact that it does not say God, but rather supernatural agencies. How is supernatural agencies God? The previous video on Barrett will be linked down below, as well as the article from which the quote is taken. So for you to stop lying would be very much appreciated.
There's really amazing, I think, another psychologist, Dr. Olivera Petrovich, and she says that atheism is an acquired position, right? Meaning your default position, the position that you're in before you change, is theism.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, she is actually an atheist. And also we're going to put the link for her.
All the references and the links
they're all
will
going to be in the
description
videos,
box. Yeah.
And now it's time to go down the rabbit hole. I went to your video, clicked the link to another video by another user, and it instantly caught my attention how he had disabled comments. So I went to his channel to find out why. he was Catholic, and that made my suspicions ramp up even further. So I went back to the original video, clicked the link he sourced, and guess who appeared? The friendly atheist. More accurately, his rebuttal of the comments made by The Age, a news site, which, like you, had quote-mined what was actually said to offer a pro-religious spin. So there you have it, folks. Another complete and utter lie.
So I guess to sum it up, what we're trying to get across is that we do not need any rational logical arguments to prove the existence of God. We don't need these things to warrant us in believing in the existence of God. Okay.
Except for the facts of, yes, you do. Even if you could find evidence that children were hardwired to believe innately, all this would mean is that children are hardwired to believe innately. That does not mean God exists. The only reason I went through your previous arguments was because I wanted to cover on both fronts. I wanted to point out first, well, even if I give you this whole argument, you're lying. And then afterwards I'll go, well, the entire argument was also false. So therefore you can't come back and just say I'm avoiding the issue. So, a lot of us are programmed innately to have certain fears in something. That doesn't mean that fear is rational. This is the same mind that believes in magic. So if you want to use the rationale of a child, then by all means. But that's your issue, not mine.
Before we end the show...
The end is nigh. I never thought a person would ever get me to say that.
Say, if somebody watching this video goes and they speak to a friend of theirs, a colleague of theirs, say someone who's agnostic or an atheist,
Yes.
and they say to them, belief in God is natural, and give them the sort of explanations that we give. And the person says, well, that's just based on blind faith.
Yes.
You're just basically coming up with a concept and saying, oh, it's just something I don't need to prove, and anything else that we have in life has to be proven.
Yes.
Right?
Also known as a special pleading fallacy.
How would that person respond
Well,
to
you
this?
could tell that this person has a scientific sort of inclination. They go from that perspective, right? You could tell them this, look, you believe in science, or you follow science, it's a good method. Do you know that science is also based on an assumption?
Yes.
A properly basic belief,
No.
which you can't prove. The real world exists. This is an assumption, an axiom that science accepts. Can't prove it. It doesn't have to prove it.
Axiom?
Axiom meaning an assumption, base assumption that doesn't require any evidence.
Okay, sure.
Right? So it can't prove this, but it accepts it, and it's completely rational to accept that. In the same way, it's completely rational to accept in the existence of God.
Now, show me how belief in God compares to science. Demonstrate it to me. Yes, the universe could be fake, but if the universe is fake, then your God goes just as well as science. But even within that universe, our known realm, your God does not work. How many people have been cured by belief in God? How many homes have been fed by faith? How many wars have been stopped by religion? The answer is none. All of these things have been accomplished by people, by humanity, not some belief in God. So yes, the rest of your video is just the basic wrapping up, so there's no point going on. As always, all the relevant links down below. So yes, this is Essence of Thought. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Take care and out.